Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero?
I love every time we get to talk. It's always a beautiful conversation. And in the middle of this universal mess, you just put out a new book about your mental mess.
Exactly. How did I know that? How did I know that?
How did you know? I mean, I think if everybody out there wasn't quite clear on the fact that sometimes they had a mental mess going on in their head, many, many more of us are aware right now. So I want to hear from you. Obviously, you're such a prolific writer. You've done so much. What made you write this book and what made this one special?
Well, I think what's really special about it is the fact that we all as humans are battling with our mind all the time, and we're making mental messes all the time. And I wanted to try and help people understand that this is who we are as humans, and we can do something about it. Because I think the current, you and I both know from the current approach to mental health, it's a scary approach where you get identified with a label and told you have this neuropsychiatric brain disease, and you kind of feel hopeless and out of control, and you take your empowerment and hope is taken away. I mean, your area of speciality being addiction, they make it this thing that you can't control yourself, whereas we all know that there's an underlying cause. So I've tried to level the playing fields and help people recognize that if you're human, you're a mental mess, own it. Let's fix it. You're totally able to fix it. And obviously there's extremes, there's extremes where we go through extremes in our daily life, up and down and so on. But we can do something about it. And this book is very sort of dear to me because it's an accumulation of nearly 4 decades of research. Because I've developed the basic theories 38 years ago when I was working in South Africa in the apartheid era and with traumatic brain injury and very severely challenged people with Alzheimer's, you name it, addictions. So I worked in that environment. I even worked in places like war-torn Rwanda. And there was such a need for me to develop a tool to help people develop an understanding to help people to understand how to work with their mind. And it would lead to all these years of understanding mind, what is mind, how is it separate from brain, and developing a theory and systems. And then I've refined those over the years, and just recently in early 2020 finished a set of clinical trials, and I've summarized the sort of overarching core findings in the book as well to help people see the science behind the psychology. So the marriage of the two.
That's what I always love about your work, right, is there's so many sources of it, right, from the spiritual to the scientific. And I think we need to get more comfortable as a species, as a race, I'll say the human race, with the meeting place of all these things, right? For so long, it's been about camps. Are you on the science or the spirituality or the psychology camp? And I think we're realizing it's all integrated. And I got to tell you, when I hear the title of the book, your mental mess, I almost think of you as like the Marie Kondo of your internal mental. And so here's what I love about our conversation. There's so much knowledge and evidence in what you talk about, and yet practical tips, right? Sometimes we can take neuroscience and talk about astrocytes and glial cells and dopaminergic, activation and reuptake. And people go, wait, I'm sorry, I don't even understand the words that are coming out of your mouth.
Exactly.
How does that translate to me? I think what you do so well is you help people take those concepts and apply them to yourself. So let's dig into that a little bit. I know I have a mental mess. I'm always sorting it out. I like to make my mental bed as often as I can early in the morning, right? I have my rituals in the morning. Walk me through some of the tips that you kind of uncovered and ended up releasing in this book.
Oh, I love the way you express it. And yes, I agree, Adi. We always have these excellent discussions that can go on for hours. And it's so important to have the marriage between spirituality and science. I don't see them as separate things. I honestly see science and spirituality as the same thing. It's just looking at this, it's looking at who we are as humans in this earth we live in from two different perspectives.
Yes.
And the marriage of the two makes it much more holistic. And we've had such a move to biological neuropsychiatry that we've lost our view of humanity. So if I can answer, I can dive straight into the tips, or we can sort of build a foundation at first, maybe.
Let's build it. Let's build a house.
Let's build a house, and then we can come in. Then I can kind of blend the 5 steps and maybe do some examples and applications.
Love
And
it.
so essentially, what just as sort of as the overview, all the years of research and 25 years of clinical practice led to the desperate desire to understand mind, as I mentioned, and working with people with such severe trauma and seeing them go from literally being vegetables, some of them, to getting degrees, and people getting through the most severe trauma and actually going back into society, and not just one but thousands of people, and now millions that we reach, really encouraged me to simply science, as we've been saying. And so I try to find out, what is the mind, what is the brain, what's the difference. And as you and I both know, in science, mind is considered, or mind, kind of, they call it consciousness is the hard question of science. For me, I don't agree with that. I think mind and consciousness is the most obvious question in science, because you never get away from your mind. So with that being the foundation, what do I mean? So I'll give you a simple analogy. We can go around about 3 weeks without food. We can go around about 2 to 3 days without water. We can go around about 2 to 3 minutes without oxygen, but we can't even go 2 to 3 seconds without using our mind. And right now, you and I are using our mind to communicate, using our mind to listen to me. I'm using my mind to talk to you. The listeners are using their mind to process this information.
Sure.
So, and we've got to see mind as this all-pervasive, overarching who you are. If you did no mind, if you're alive mind, I can take your brain out your head and we can look at it all day, it will do nothing. But if your brain is in your head and you're alive, your brain is functioning. So we've got to see our mind and brain as separate, but inseparable. So the brain, and I've got some props here which always help people to just visualize these things. You're not your brain. Your brain is a responder. So the foundational principle here is that your mind is always working. You don't ever go 3 seconds without thinking. You're thinking all day long. You're thinking at night. Your mind is in action all the time. Your brain is just being driven by that. So your brain is a responder, not a generator. And we've been told in today's media, and the way that we are sold the idea of mental illness, is that we are told that the brain is generating thoughts, it's generating mind, but your brain can't do anything if you did. It will not generate anything. It's only responding because you're alive. And it's that principle of mind moving through brain and brain responding that is a guiding principle behind the 5 steps. You want to ask something?
I love that. Okay, so let's stop because there's a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
And this relates to some conversations that I've been having with some friends recently. And so maybe we can even pause on this principle alone of mind versus brain and talk for a minute. Our mind is often incredibly busy in everyday life, right? Especially the technologically informed life that so many of us live now, because the flow of information is so consistent and so pervasive nowadays that the brain has so much to react to. It is constantly processing. There's constantly inputs in a way that I think humans have probably never dealt with in terms of the density of the data that's coming at them.
Exactly.
I was talking to a friend just last night here, and I mentioned I'd done a 4-day silent retreat, and that's probably one of the moments in my life where this concept you're talking about became most clear. And so maybe that can be kind of like, I'd love to analyze this analogy with you a little bit. I came into this experience. I knew I wanted to do it. I had some trepidation. I can tell you with certainty, up until the day that I started this thing, I'd never spent 4 days silent since the day I was born, if you really think about it. So you're talking about mind and brain sort of processing. But then we have output, right? Our brain produces output and listens to input from sound. To have 4 days of none of that happening, not human generated anyway, was going to be quite an experience. And it was very scary in the beginning.
I'm sure.
Because one of the things that happens is right off the bat, you become incredibly aware of how busy your mind is.
Yeah.
Because the way I talk about it is, it's as if I had this inbox. Remember those old offices that would have like an
Yeah.
inbox and an
Yes, an
outbox,
outbox.
and you just move things from one to the other in your
Yeah.
envelopes. What I realized was my inbox was so full, and it kept filling up, and my brain was trying to process it quickly enough, um, but it was never catching up. And so when silence was
Yeah.
introduced, I still had so much to process. It took me 3 days for my brain, through my mind, to process enough information to where there would be these moments of seeming quiet. And it's not like there was no processing happening during that time, but there was no my brain wasn't still doing busy work from catching up. And it was only on the
Yeah.
fourth day that I had these moments where that presence of mind, we talk about mindfulness or meditation, right? That word mind is in there,
Yeah.
mindfulness, right? I'm paying
Yeah.
attention to my mind. I'm full of that. Where I had these moments where I could actually just observe and only be processing the information that's coming at me in the moment, whether there's an animal in the hills or the sound of the wind or something along those
Yeah.
lines. The difference between the way my mind was functioning when I came into that place and 4 days later when the brain had worked through all the busy work, it felt like I was almost two completely different people. So when you're talking about people's distinction between mind and brain and how the mind never stops and the brain is there to process, constant information, I see it, and maybe your perception of this is different, but I see it as in
Yeah.
part of the mental mess is in the gap between what our mind is maybe capable of doing or what it wants to do the most. I don't really know how to talk about that. And then
Yeah.
the limiting potential of our brain to process that quickly. And I found the first time that I felt in a very long time like that mess was clean was on the fourth day of that silent retreat. So I don't know if that speaks to the principle that you have, but that's what comes up for me when you talk about this mental mess.
It's excellent. It's an excellent example, and it's a great foundation because we came into this COVID pandemic situation already a huge mess. And the huge mess is pretty much what you've just described, where we have become so advanced technologically and medically that have had literally we're living in a state of hurry sickness. And that started reflecting in humanity in a very interesting way, because for years we've been living longer because of advances in technology and medicine. But in 1996, between 1996 and 2014, that changed. And now we are going backwards in mind. So there's a reversal of trends. The reversal of trends is for years we were advancing in living longer. Now we are dying younger from preventable lifestyle diseases. So in the mid 2000s, if you think of this, it's like it's crazy. We entered into a pandemic in 2020 that with a massive problem that was identified in 1996 and further confirmed in 2014, which is people are dying younger, 8 to 15 years young, 8 to 25, years younger than they should from preventable lifestyle diseases. So we track that back down to mental mess. The way we are using our mind to make lifestyle decisions is actually impacting our physiology, our neurology, and our length of life. So this is what I showed in my most recent clinical trials as well, that this means that if we don't manage our mind, if we don't manage our mental mess, our mind is always working, our brain is always changing in response. If you don't direct and control the mind, you literally use the mind to control the mind, and I'll explain that principle in a moment. But we literally use the mind to control the mind to change the brain. That is happening all the time. The point is, how are you managing that process? So you're going to change, your mind is going to change, your brain is going to change, your body's going to change. You can either let it just happen, and it's just this messy happening, and sometimes you'll hit this, you'll hit the sweet spot and sometimes you won't, or you can become very proactive and preemptive and self-regulated and actually control how it's happening. So you'll still make the mental messes, but you become much more proactive. So your 4 days of silence, we're kind of teaching you to get an insight and a glimpse into what we should be doing with our minds. So hurry sickness, and I'm not saying technology is bad, Obviously, we want all of that, but you can't have a complete focus on the biology or the physical nature of inventions and technology. You can't just focus on what we can see and touch and feel and hear. We have to also focus on the non-physical, and we are predominantly as humans non-physical. In fact, at our core, if you want to go with quantum physics, we are waves of particles, basically down to subatomic particles, which are basically waves. So, and we live in gravitational fields. Just last year, some group of scientists won the Nobel Prize for identifying the tools to identify and understand gravitational fields. And the concept of mind is incorporated into that kind of research. So we have mind as being this much more energetic gravitational field concept, each with our own unique mind. So my mind can only go in my brain, and your mind can only go in your brain, but they're separate but inseparable. So for my mind to be able to express through what I say and do, through my behaviors, my actions, my words, my life, what I do as a human, what you do as a human, you're an expert in addiction, so that's coming through, and you do podcasts, whatever, everything that you do through your work is coming from your mind, your unique mind, moving through your unique brain, planting those thoughts and growing those thoughts into your brain, your body, and your mind, which then enable you to express Addy. And so that process can be very fluid and directed, or it can be very messy. And most of the time, we live in the world of messy, but we can learn to improve on how long we stay in messy. So we can catch messy quickly, and we can only do that by tuning into mind. So it's like the basic underlying premise is your mind's always working, so you may as well direct how it works, or it's going to just go all over the place. And that's essentially the core of my work, and the core of the book, and the core of the 5 steps, and then it's got all the different applications, from the most basic simple level to the most complex level of dealing with trauma, which is our sort of most complex part of ourselves and our life.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. So this works on so many layers, right? Look, I'm in the field. So in many ways, I have put things in place in my everyday life, a morning habit, evening rituals, things throughout my day to organize that relative mess, right? I start out with a gratitude practice and self-affirmations and planning for the day, exactly to do that, to scaffold. I think what the silent retreat made me realize is that sometimes, and I think this is what you called it hurry culture. I think what I realize is that those, how do I say this best? Those processes I put in place, it's like putting shelves inside the room of my mind. And so what I'm doing is the processes that I've created have allowed me to put things in shelves. But also what's happening is the shelves are overflowing, and there's stuff falling on the floor, and I'm running out of room. And there's an issue of capacity to some extent, right?
Well, definitely the brain can't keep up with the mind. And that's a huge principle in cleaning up your mental mess is you have to know how to understand that balance so the stuff doesn't fall off the shelves. Because you're going to put stuff on the shelves anyway. That's just life. Every experience is something you're going to put on a shelf. So you experience life through your mind. So like now we're listening, you had the silent retreat, you read it. As you wake up in the morning, you are experiencing life through your mind. And it's going into 3 places. As you experience that event, those shelves that you talk about are represented in 3 places biologically. One in the brain as thought trees, and I've got like a little image here of a plant, so that's a thought tree. They literally look like trees in your brain. Also in the DNA of your body, so in every cell of your body, and we have 37 to 100 trillion cells in your brain and your body, and also in your mind in these gravitational fields. So you build thoughts with their memories, because the thought is the tree, the memories are the branches. So they're 2 different things.
The dendrites and the connections among neurons.
And the roots, exactly. So that's the thought is the whole concept. And you build the thought as a result of your mind. But we always think people use the word thoughts and memories interchangeably. They're not the same thing. Thought is the whole tree, the whole concept. So it might be low self-esteem or something like that, low self-esteem or trauma or people pleasing. So it's the concept, but the branches are the memories. So when you bring up a thought from your non-conscious mind, from your brain and from your body, you are going to have a lot. It's one concept. I have low self-esteem, but then there's all the memories associated with it, all the branches which contain the memories of emotions and the actual data of what
so
happened.
One of the ways we talk about that kind of in the neurosciences is like each one of those the entire thought, the entirety of it is the network activation, right? The entirety of what you're experiencing. And each, there may be visual aspects of the memory, there may be
You have to
auditory
be in here.
aspects. Those are the individual
Which will be
branches
there
and the
and
individual contacts.
yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's an
And it
important
pulls
thing
on
for,
different parts of the brain. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think that's an important thing for people to understand. I still deal oftentimes with the fact that a lot of people think your memories are like little drawers in your head, that you open up one and it says, "Oh, remember the time that we went to the Grand Canyon with the family and we had a grand time." That's not how a memory works. The way a memory works is it literally almost activates, like you just showed a little tree. It activates this entire network in your brain. What did
Exactly.
it look like? What did it sound like? What did it feel like? What did it smell like? Literally, what did the air feel like on my body? And it's why you mentioned trauma. It's why sometimes these memories can feel overwhelming, because it is the reactivation of this entire tree in your brain.
Exactly. So, and there's multiple trees. We have trillions of these trees. So every experience you've had from a newborn, from in the womb, is in a thought tree.
Its
And every
own
time
tree,
it
yeah.
comes up, it change exactly with all of its sensations, the data, which is all the visual, the auditory, the emotions, the what actually happened. And then if it keeps on happening, if there's a continued abuse, or if it doesn't have to be just negative. Here's a toxic tree. That would be the abuse. That would be the healthy thing. But every time we re-experience something, we add more branches. And this would be the learning to drive thought. This would be the going to the Grand Canyon thought. This might be the trauma thought. And you've got trillions of these in your mind. So I always tell people to visualize your mind and your brain, because they have a sort of similar conceptual structure. Well, the brain, the physiology of the brain looks like trees, but to try and visualize a gravitational field is difficult. So think of a forest, and a forest of an infinite forest of trees represents your non-conscious mind, not subconscious, but your non-conscious mind, where all these thoughts are stored with all their memories, and they contain your belief systems, your values, your every experience, every emotion, every feeling, sensation attached to them. But they're always changing. They're dynamic. They interact as you as a person experience more. These are always changing. So the non-conscious, as you go through, like you wake up in the morning and you read something, or you watch a movie and it triggers something, and it triggers one of these to come up, or triggers one of these to come up. A thought comes up, and then suddenly there's this whoosh of memories, because then all the little memory trees become activated as well. And because you store it in your body, you can feel the physical sensations in your body as well. And that's the PTSD that we're talking about, just to help people understand, why do we feel it? Because when we store it in our brain, our mind, and our body, 3 places. So the non-conscious mind is this infinite forest that works 24/7. It never stops, and it's where all of these trees are stored. Down the middle of the forest, I always tell people to visualize a huge, big, green, beautiful part of the forest that's untouchable. That's kind of our wisdom, our inner spiritual wisdom, our mind that knows what to do, kind of just that knowing in your knower. Then on the outside are all the other trees that some are green, some are toxic, some are not so green, some are small, some are big, and that's all our experiences that we are adding on. And what I try and teach people to do is that when you neurocycle, which is the concept that I developed, neuro meaning brain cycle, when you neurocycle, what you're doing is you're driving your mind you like literally accessing that middle of the forest, that wise mind. You're accessing that in order to go and identify, shine the spotlight on the toxic issue that is affecting you. Maybe you're stuck and you're feeling depressed, and you need to look at those warning signals. So you gather awareness of the warning signals, which then enables you to then wake up that inner wisdom, and you almost split into 2, where you go into the Caroline or the D that's now drawing on the wise mind to now analyze, why am I doing this? Why am I stuck? Why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? Why am I doing these things? Why do I have these behaviors? And then you go through a process of not just being aware. Mindfulness is not enough. You have to go beyond. Mindfulness alone, I show this in my research, just being aware and not being able to manage it will actually create worse damage in the brain and the body, and down to the level of the DNA. Because we looked at the brain, we looked at the neuroscientific aspects of use the QEEG, we looked at the blood work, standard stuff, cortisol, histamine, homocysteine, DHEA, but we also looked at certain things like prolactin, and we also looked at telomeres. And so we looked at a whole composite, and on top of the person's narrative and psychology. So what I'm saying here is that when you recognize you're stuck and you're depressed, or you've got this low self-esteem, or you're just not coping, or you're feeling burnt out, you've got to grab those. And when I say you with your mind, your wise mind, you've got to, we know it's like, okay, I'm not coping. That's your wise mind that's telling you I'm not coping. And you draw on that, and you almost split yourself in 2, and you say, okay, well, let me see, what are my signals? I'm anxious, I'm frustrated, I'm bored, I'm whatever. And then you say, okay, what are my behaviors? What are my emotions? So we start tracking this tree, this toxic tree, from those warning signals of the boredom, the stress in my body, or the depression and the palpitating heart. And then the behaviors, these little branches are the behaviors, and then the emotions attached to those. And then you go down the tree trunk to the perspective, and then you go down to the root memories, which is your origin story. And this takes time. You're not going to find this in 5 minutes. There's 5 steps that you do daily over 63 days. And that's been part of the work that I've done. To clean up your mental mess is not a 5-minute process. You can use the neurocycle in 5 minutes to get yourself together, to manage the moment. And there's lots of neurocycle hacks in the book to help you, or neurocycle guides or hacks, whatever, biohacks, to help you to manage. Like if you have an argument and you've got to now suddenly go and get in front of the camera, like you and I are both in front of the camera all the time, and maybe something happens and you have an argument with your wife or something, and you've got to get yourself together to jump in front of the camera. You can use a neurocycle in that instance. Or you get a terrible email from someone, or a disaster happens. So you can use the neurocycle to bring yourself back into the space in that moment. But if you're fixing up something like a toxic trauma or an addiction or a toxic habit, or you're trying to build a new habit, that won't change in 5 minutes. That's a daily part of your daily work, and it's got to be done in cycles of 63 days. So that's the sort of overarching concept of embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing. And just having said that, Adi, if I may just quickly wrap this particular part, we keep talking about mind, but we need a definition of mind, and that's part of the work that I've done, and I explain it very clearly in the book. I explain what the unconscious mind is, what the conscious mind is, subconscious, all that stuff. But what is mind? When we talk about all these non-conscious, conscious, mind needs a definition. So mind is very simple to understand. You're alive. You don't even go 3 seconds without thinking. So mind is thinking, but it's 2 other things as well. You're always thinking. When you think, you will feel. We never think without feeling. We always draw, bless you. We always draw, bless you there. We always draw on our emotions. So as you think, you will feel. And as you think and feel, you will choose. So mind is 3 things: think, feel, choose, think, feel, choose, think, feel, choose, think, feel, choose. And as you think, feel, choose, like right now, as you're listening to me, your mind is absorbing the sound waves, the electromagnetic light waves from the visuals. And that, what's absorbing that? Your mind. You are thinking and feeling and choosing around those electromagnetic forces. You push them through your brain. Your brain then responds electromagnetically, chemically, and genetically, and you actually transform what you're seeing and hearing into protein branches that are dendrites on neurons that are little and inside the proteins, the memory is actually a vibration. And that's what you're doing now. So you're changing the structure of your brain. That's what the listeners are doing right now. And that's powerful. And that process is something you can direct. That change in your brain, as we know, is neuroplasticity. What I'm saying is that if you control your thinking, feeling, choosing, which is your mind, you can actually direct the neuroplasticity of your brain, and you can change the health of your body, which is also what I found in my clinical trials. So I said a lot. We can unpack that too.
There's so much. One of the main patterns, or the main themes that I'm hearing here, is you're talking about the difference between being reactive, waiting for things to happen and then figuring out what to do with them in the moment, and being proactive, which is to say, I understand how this machine works now. I'm not just having to react when things happen. I understand how the machine works. So at Ignited, we have this, I use this kind of card with our users, but I use this honest exploration, radical acceptance, individualized transformation is some of the ways that we talk about what you're talking about, which is when you're having these reactions, these external feelings, somatic experiences, whatever it is, memories that are coming up that are problematic. Too many people spend their time reacting to those things and often actually trying to avoid and run away from them. What you're saying is something we support so heavily at Ignited, which is do not run away from these things. They are signals. Paying attention to them is the way that you actually intervene in a responsible way. But if you understand that what you're experiencing is a natural reaction based on the way that your machine, the mind, the brain connection work, now you have power. You can intervene because you understand how the machine works, right? It's a difference between, I have a car, I know nothing about being a mechanic. So if something breaks down in my car, I'm left to be reactive. I have to call my mechanic, call AAA, get some help. But if you're an expert in cars and your car breaks down, it's not a big deal. You can look at it, you can analyze what's happening, you can understand where things are getting stuck in the motor or in the engine, and you can fix it and move along your way. And what you're saying is, if we all recognize that there's a mental mess to some extent going on because our brain is doing this constantly and our mind is relying on our brain for its processing, you get to intervene. You get to have a say in what your brain does by learning what it is, and you're explaining it so well. I love that you really, like I said before, you take some of these neuroplasticity and epigenetic concepts and bring it to a way that people can actually understand it in terms of representations for themselves. But once you understand how these processes work, you're not a victim to them anymore. You can now play an active role in changing them. And what you mentioned that we do a lot of, and I want to point out for people, is oftentimes the path is through stories, through understanding these memories and their origins, and then diving deeper into the roots. And I think too often, and I'm probably a victim of this as many other people are, we get very cerebral in it and we think we can explain it away. But what I'm hearing you saying is, at the core, this is about the roots. This is about the way that it affects you viscerally. It's about the way that it,
it's on every level, and it does. You're quite right. I mean, like we, for example, in our clinical trials, we had an experimental and a control group. We did a random controlled study with all the gold standard of, the statistical applications and so on. And in our experimental group, both groups were made aware of their issues. So both groups came in, and through the testing, psychological narrative's the most important. Who are you? What's your story? What's your context? Most important. Then we did some standard psychological scales, which actually proved that's used all the time, and we showed that they're very ineffective in actually determining anything. And then I've developed a psychological scale that actually was as accurate as what we found to be in the brain. It literally correlated with what we found the brain doing, because your brain and your body know and your non-conscious know what's happening before you're consciously aware. Your conscious is always a little bit behind the game, and it's because it's driven by the conscious. So we have to be aware of that our conscious, our conscious mind's a little bit slower than what's actually going on. But if we learn to tune into ourselves, we can actually find out what is going on, which is what you're basically saying. So what we saw in our experimental and control group, that through the psychological testing, the narrative, through the QEEGs, the neuroscientific testing, through the blood work, looking at things like the body's inflammation and hormones, and looking at down to the level of the telomeres, the DNA, we found they became very aware. Now we know from neuroscience that the minute something gets gone, the minute I'm aware, that thought is now malleable. We know that as soon as we remember something, these protein branches, the protein vibrations and the chemical connections, the bonds are weakened. So that means we've shifted the power balance. Now I can start controlling this. This is painful. The only way out is through. It's sore, it hurts, it's the therapy effect, and we saw this happening at 21 days. You're going to get worse before you get better, increase in anxiety, etc., etc. But those are not illnesses, anxiety, depression. Those are just signals that something's actually going on, that there's a whole narrative going on here, and we need to go through the process. So in both the experimental and the control group, they were very aware. They pulled them up. But the control group didn't get any form of mind management, whereas so they had no way of cleaning up the mental mess. Whereas the experimental group got the neurocycle, and it was loaded on their phone, and they did it themselves. So they didn't get therapy from me. They were I'm trying to show people that mental health is accessible. You don't need to go. I'm not saying don't go for therapy. Therapy is very important. This doesn't replace therapy. This enhances therapy. We have therapists around the world using the system with their clients. So essentially, in the experimental group, they got the neurocycle, they got the mind management, they worked through it. So we had some of them that were like suicidal when they came in, depressed, trauma, broken, worn out from work life, etc. And what we found is in the experimental group, there was management happening. They were able to deal with it. So for example, they would come in, one of the subjects, for example, a group of them came in saying that I am depressed. So the identity had become depression because they'd been battling so long, they'd been diagnosed and labeled And according to the research that I mentioned in the beginning, when you are labeled with a mental disease under the current biological paradigm, you actually can knock off another few years of your life. It actually reduces your life because you change how you see yourself. And what does that mean? What we saw at the beginning of the study was, for example, these people that saw themselves as depression, they had such inflammation in their brain and body. Their brain was so out of sync. We saw the front two, for example, we saw lots, but I'm going to give you just a very simple example. The front part of the brain is very involved in, as you know, decision making, cognitive
like the brain
fluency, being able
CEO.
to self-evaluate, exactly, executive functions, introspection, decision making, all that stuff. So what you want in that, for that to happen well, you want balance between the two sides of the brain. So you get different brain waves, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, and they've got to flow in a certain way. So what we saw with someone who was very depressed was asymmetry, so imbalance between the two sides of the brain, and also very, very low energy, so very low alpha, which showed that they weren't able to get insight. There was not good insight. There was not good awareness. They were suppressing. They were pushing stuff down. So we saw high bursts of delta, showing that there's a lot of suppressed stuff going on in the brain. That showed a lot of inflammation in the brain. We saw the alpha was asymmetrical, which is not a good sign. What that means is that there's an imbalance between the two sides, and you can't look inward. You can't find that wisdom. You get stuck. That's a very typical kind of pattern, and that can lead to either a lot of feelings of depression or anxiety. It can either or comorbidity, both of those, and even go down the track of getting psychotic breaks and the things that they label as schizophrenia, which is not a disease. It's simply another signal of extreme distress in the mind from adverse circumstances, and you just try to cope, and that's what you're doing for survival. So we have to help bring people back from that. So what we saw in the experimental group was this kind of pattern, and once we had evaluated them, once we had assessed them, they got worse, because now they're even more aware of what they weren't aware of. So it got even worse for a time. As soon as they started mind managing, it was phenomenal. We saw shifts at 7-14, and by day 21, they had reconceptualized, they'd embraced process, because the whole thing with the neurocycle is you embrace process and reconceptualize. So daily they did that through 5 steps. They gathered awareness. They then started analyzing from why am I gathering awareness of the depression, the response in the body, so the emotional warning signals, the physical warning signals, the behaviors, the perspective, the sensations. Then they would reflect on that, which is the second step. Why am I feeling these? Ask, answer, discuss. Reflect is a massively complex word that it's not just a simple answer and ask and answer. It's an ask, answer, discuss, and explore. It's a detective. It's search. It's find. It's dig deep. And then then you dig deep into the perspective, and you start seeing a little bit of why I'm doing this. Then you go to the third step, which we're all familiar with, which is writing. But I teach people to write in a system that I developed 38 years ago, and I've extensively researched, called a metacog. Instead of writing in lines, you write in patterns, and you just pour your brain on paper, and it reflects kind of the structure of the brain. When you write in that way, you go even deeper, because each of these steps they're simple, but they are stimulating a major brain changes in how the energy flows through the brain, how the blood flows through the brain, how the oxygen flows through the brain. So for example, when you gather awareness, you suddenly get a burst of oxygen and blood flow, and a balance between the two sides of the brain, and an increase in alpha and delta and gamma. And what that means is that you are now looking inside your memories, and you're starting to analyze them and integrate and find the story. As you reflect, that happens even more. As you write, that happens even more. And so there's a certain pattern that we can see that is representative of people that are thinking deeply and getting to grips with their issue, and using their ability to stand back and observe their own thinking. And then once you've written, you go to the fourth step, which is, okay, what have I written? Because when you write in the metacog, you're not trying to be a literary artist. You're not you're just pouring your brain on paper. You're just getting it out. And it's a big mess. And that's great. And it's all over the place, but you'll be amazed at what comes out. And when you do it fast in the sort of time frames that I give, you actually find you make associations and groupings that you didn't even know were there. And then the recheck is your chance to go and see the patterns, see the triggers, see the activators, which is a better word, I feel, than triggers. Triggers is so overused, but an activator is what's the pattern behind why I'm doing, and could I do it differently? And that's where you become like a wise advocate, where you stand back and observe your own thinking throughout this whole thing. the attitude is get into the wise mind. So it's Caroline Macy, Caroline Wise, Caroline Macy, and you're literally sitting down next to each other and you're asking yourself, okay, gather awareness, reflect, write, let's recheck what you've written. And then you wrap up the day, and you do this all in around 15 to 45 minutes. You wrap up the day with an active reach, which is something constructive that you do. And it might be as simple as a statement of, you may have identified on this first day through this process that, okay, there's some sort of trauma in your life, and you know, they don't know the details yet, but you know there was a trauma at some point, and this is why you are so depressed and battling with relationships, and you feel shame, you feel, and you get to the recheck, and you see, okay, I'm actually seeing myself as shame, but that's not necessary, because I'm the victim here. That I don't have to see myself as shame. So your active reach could be something as simple as, I am not shame. And you literally put that into your active reach reminders. I have an app that goes with cleaning up the mental mess. There's an app you can download called Neurocycle. It was called Switch in the past. Now we've updated it and added in all new programs, Neurocycle programs, and you can set your reminder in there. And then 7 times during the day, it just pops up on your phone. You know how reminders pop up on your phone and you read it?
Yeah.
That's all you do. That's what because it keeps it in the conscious mind. Now the conscious mind is different to the non-conscious.
Of
Keeps
the place
reminding
you're going to.
Exactly. It reminds you of the place you're going to. So it's hopeful. This is where you could fit a positive affirmation in. A positive affirmation without all the steps behind won't be as effective, because it doesn't have the strength behind it. But this is where you can have, or it could be something you do, or it could be something you sing, but it's simple, but it's taking you to that place of hope. And it's also like a full stop at the end of a sentence. What people do with trauma work, and you're familiar with this because you work with people in the sense, and is that people will try and fix it all today, or they go into therapy, or they get a handle on a technique, and they immerse themselves and they think about it all day long. Then you ruminate instead of deep think, and so you slip from. And we spend half to 3/4 of our day in self-talk. So we need to. This neurocycle teaches you how to make sure that the self-talk is constructive and not destructive. That it's actually moving forward and not backwards, and moving you to deep thinking, etc. And then you would do that daily, and each day you get a little bit more insight. But if you spend like hours on this all day, you'll get, as I said, you'll be even worse mental mess. So the idea is to limit it to a fixed period of time during the day.
Love it.
And you said you start your day with like positive affirmations and stuff. The beginning of the day, our cortisol rises at a good level. Our cortisol does all these different things during the day. In the morning, our focus is very good. So and stronger and more resilient. And if you can't do it in the beginning of the day, it's not serious. But I do recommend that you neurocycle. If you're working on trauma or toxic habits or addictions, the heavy stuff, I would recommend, if you can, try and do it in the morning or middle of the day, and not close to bedtime, because it could, it's kind of heavy, so it can affect your sleep. Yeah. The other side of the 5 steps is brain building, and that you can do anytime. We can stop there for a moment before I go into something else, and if you want to unpack a little bit of what I said there.
There's so many principles that we've talked about so many times on this podcast that you're touching on. So one of them is the 1% principle. Everybody has these goals, and they think, I'm going to get to this goal tomorrow or next week.
Yeah.
Take a breath. If you want long-term maintenance of this next place you're going to, it's going to be incremental, consistent changes that will create what you're going for.
Exactly.
You have to set aside the time, and you have to be consistent. That's what's going to create that piece. I love that. The confirmation bias, expectancy bias, this whole concept that
all that stuff.
If you think of yourself as sick, if you think of yourself as having a disease that is hopeless and helpless, your brain kind of gives up on your ability to change from it, because you've already told it that you can't. And so all these elements you talk about are so built into so much of the work that I do, and that I've seen help so many people, because unfortunately, you're right. We live, the last 20 to 30 years have been this kind of medicalization of our mind. And we live in a world, especially in the Western world, I'll say, that in Western society, that this acute care model, right? So you break something, you fix it. You have a heart attack, you go take care of your heart.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about is
preventative medicine.
Don't wait until things go wrong. That's like waiting until you can't walk through your house because there's so much stuff on the floor to clean up the floor. That's not how you do it. You see something on the floor, you pick it up and you put it back in place. And what we're talking about here is a pretty simple process of saying, hey, I'm having something happen in my life that I don't like. What is the process that I can break that down to? What's the origin? What is going on internally? What can I do about it? And how do I change it?
Yeah, exactly, and and what we saw from our clinical trials is when you take this approach. So we like the neurocycle. You can put everything that you do into the neurocycle. You can do any technique, any therapeutic approach, any psychodynamic, any psychotherapy. It's not a technique. It's not a therapy. It is all the principles anyone teaches it, because everyone's got their own way of teaching,
Sure, sure.
helping people. It's basically how do you make your mind work and your brain work. So it's the overarching vehicle within which you can put your whatever you're using, whatever way you do gather awareness, whatever, you can do that in your own way. But the point is that you need to go through those 5 steps, and you need to be very self-regulated in doing them, and you need to follow that sequence, because that is how your mind builds thoughts into your brain. It's the science of thought. And when people get that, and that's what we found with our experimental group, is there's this immediate change in the brain and the body. So for example, as I said earlier on, our experimental and control group, they had like crazy brains and like all these red spots across the brain. Some had blue brains, which meant that there was tremendous low energy. Some had what we called red brains, where there was so many spots of red over the brain, which showed too much high beta, which we saw them with high inflammation, high cortisol, low DHEA. Prolactin is a very interesting hormone that we think of and associate with women who are breastfeeding, but men and women have prolactin throughout their life. And prolactin is one of the newer research areas where they're seeing a direct link to emotional management, or managing your mind, their thoughts and their thoughts, thinking, feeling, and choosing. So how you think, how you feel, and how you choose. So things like prolactin and the telomeres on DNA are very representative of how we manage our thinking, feeling, and choosing. They're kind of like proxies. So we saw at the beginning of the study people with very weakened telomeres, and I'll explain that in a moment because it's fascinating. Very low, high prolactin, high homocysteine. And what that all means is that their stress axis was going crazy. 1,400 neurophysiological responses were working against them instead of for them. They had high levels of inflammation through their brain and their body, and all of this combined. Another thing, their telomeres, which are, let me explain this. We think of DNA, the strand, and then you pull out a chromosome. It looks like an X, and where you see my pink fingernails, those are telomeres. And telomeres are
the tip ends of the DNA material.
Exactly, and they're constantly replacing, and they're involved in cell division. They're very important in cell division and cell health.
And
so if they're not
telomere
healthy,
length is one of those things that has been heavily involved in terms of your brain's health and longevity, right? So it's almost like a direct signal to longevity.
Exactly. So I did direct research on telomeres because of exactly that. And most of the research on telomeres has been done on using diet. And there's been a little bit of work on telomeres with meditation and mindfulness. And so what I've done is taken telomere research, and I've taken mindfulness and meditation as brain prep. Because before you do the 5 steps, you do brain prep. And that's where you can do things like meditation and breathing and everything, which gets the brain prepared and the body prepared for work, and then add on these 5 steps, which then takes you into beyond mindfulness. So what we saw, Eddie, you'll find this so interesting, that the telomeres, exactly what you were saying, how it's brain longevity and health. Every second we're making millions of new cells, as you know, and the health of the telomeres determines the health of those cells.
Yes.
So that will translate into your biological age ultimately. In other words, the health of your cardiovascular system, your brain, your immune system, etc. So it translates back. So we had some of our subjects at the beginning of our study who had such bad telomeres that they had biological ages that were older than their chronological age, sometimes by up to 30 years. So for example, we'd have someone who's in their 30s, but they had a biological age of in this sickly 60 or 65-year-old. So here you are 30, but you've got a body of a sickly 65-year-old. That means you're vulnerable to cardiovascular issues, neurological issues, immune system issues. So the way you are managing your mind, the way you're responding, and we on purpose excluded diet and exercise because I didn't want too many variables. And that if you add those on, obviously you're going to accelerate the process. But I wanted to show just with mind factors, when you use your mind, because mind controls diet and exercise anyway. I mean, your mind controls your digestive system completely. But we just focused predominantly on mind. I didn't interfere with diet and exercise. And we found that those people that got the mind management, we changed that, their telomeres significantly. There was a significant causative link between mind, and it's not even a correlative link, a causative link, and it was significant. The telomere length increased and stabilized in 9 weeks. And normally, oh gosh, there goes my computer. I just dropped my computer on the floor. I just knocked my laptop on the floor. It'll be fine. Let me just pick it up. Give me 1 second, Adi.
We can edit anything out. That's the beauty of non-live.
I had it open to. Sorry, I hope you can edit that. I hope you can edit that out.
I can edit. We can edit anything out. Yeah.
Perfect. I had it open to just in case I needed to find something, and I actually meant to move it away, and I knocked it off the table anyway.
No.
But no, it's fine. It's good. New technology can take a few bumps and crashes, thank goodness.
Totally.
But essentially what I'm saying is that in a short period of time, we already saw the telomere length changing in 3 weeks. And then we saw change at 6 weeks, and we saw change at 9 weeks. So what's exciting there is also we saw significant drops in cortisol. We saw significant changes in homocysteine, prolactin, DHEA. In a nutshell, when our subjects applied mind management, the neurocycle daily, where they learned, and they were doing it themselves, and sometimes they even did it wrong, but they were still getting the basic principle of 5 steps every day. Yeah. By day 21, we saw gamma peaks in the brain, which means that we saw massive reconceptualization. They had taken this thing and literally pulled it out and by the roots found the origin story and reconstructed it. So they'd reconceptualized it. So they knew why they were depressed. They knew what had happened, and they knew how to manage it. So at the beginning of the study, they had sickly bodies, inflammation in their brain, terrible telomeres, biological age is too old, totally just wanting to give up. All of them pretty much a combination of, I'm just giving you broad overview, high levels of cortisol. With mind management, by day 21, they were saying, oh, I still feel bouts of depression or anxiety, but now I know why, and now I know what to do. By day 63, because it takes 63 days to build a habit. You can't stop at day 21. If they'd stopped there, it wouldn't have been sustained. They would have fallen back into old patterns. If you don't want to fall back into old patterns, it's so significant with addiction, because you do so much work with addiction, is that we've got to change, because addiction is because we haven't found these. So we're just trying to suppress these. You're not going to change it in 21 days. So you have to do the other 42 days of work. And what we found at day 42 was a sustainable increase, a sustainable pattern where they were maintaining it. So it was strong enough to change your behavior. So day 21, I know what to do. Day 63, I'm doing it. Day 6 months later, it's my life. It's become part of who I am.
It's the new way you just survive.
It's the new way, exactly. And then we saw the homocysteine levels drop. We saw the cortisol levels drop. We saw the telomeres improving. So it's not like this is just woo-woo wellness pop culture. This is hardcore science that when you manage your mind, and you can do it within the 5 steps, as I said, there's so much leverage to apply whatever you like to do to make them work. Like even the brain prep, because you would have seen in the book, I talk about how you've got to prepare your brain. People dive in. You understand this principle. People just dive in and do stuff, but you have to prepare yourself. That's why we do deep breathing, to reset the brain. That's why we do, the meditation. But mindfulness has been so broken. That's another whole discussion. But if you we're not designed to just think of the now moment. And the mistake that we make with mindfulness is we think we've got to stay non-judgmental in the now. No, you're supposed to just gather awareness of what you're feeling now, but then you've got your brain will automatically, but here's that, but also your mind is going to temporal travel. You cannot force yourself to stay in the now. When you do, you actually cause brain damage, and that's what's not being spoken about. People think mindfulness is the answer to everything. Mindfulness is only part of. If you just stay in mindfulness, the research is showing it backfires, and we had this with our subjects in our clinical trial, where they had mindfulness, they became very aware, and then your mind automatically travels. You go to the past, you go to the future. Your mind never stays in the now for very long. You can force it to stay there for a few seconds, but it time travels automatically, and you'll spend 3/4 of your day doing that, which is normal. So if you become mindful, but you don't manage it, you get worse. So we saw the opposite happening with our control group. Everything that was happening positively, the reduced cortisol, the increased telomeres, the reduced inflammation, the balance in the brain, the correct flow of alpha, beta, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, all of that was reversed to the point where we had some of our subjects like breaking down. So obviously at the end of the study, they were all given the treatment protocol, and they were helped through to fix up and everything. So, all the ethics were it's full IRB run study. So all ethically, we gave them the protocol, but it was very interesting to see, and for them to see how you can't just be aware, not move forward. Yeah. So in brain preparation, when you breathe and do meditation, I give little examples. You can do 2 to 3 minutes of it, and you can go into the 5 steps, or you can do longer. It doesn't really matter. But as long as you are aware that you have to go beyond, that you prepare 100%. Your brain and then you go beyond. I don't know if 100%. That makes sense. Sorry, lots of talking.
No, I love it. And I know there are people listening right now just running, or maybe as they're listening, going on Amazon and grabbing the book so they can start doing the work themselves. I love this. I'm so grateful, especially during this time, that you release something like this, because people need tangible tools to help them break through. Let us know. I mean, we mentioned this before we started recording, but in the world of today, you're not doing a book tour. So tell people, where can they get the book, where they can learn more about how to work with you and how to, implement all these things in their actual lives.
Thank you. They can get the book at cleaningupyourmentalmess.com, and then that'll take you to wherever books are sold. So you can buy the book, you can go to that website, and it'll take you to all the links, Amazon, everywhere, Barnes & Noble, or you can get it from your local bookstore. It's on pre-order at the moment. You can edit this out. Are you releasing this before or during the week? Because the book comes out on the 2nd of March. So I need to know if it's before, then I'll talk about the pre-order. If it's after, then I won't say anything about the pre-order.
Whatever will help you the most.
Maybe the week before. I think that's what Dominique probably will get in a hold of it. That's probably like the week before would be great.
Right, so we'll do a pre-order the week before. Love it.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then Dominique can give you some date options around when it's best. Okay, so I can quickly then. Sorry, can I come back there?
We'll edit all this out. Yeah, of course.
I should have asked you that in the beginning.
No, it's all good.
Well, they can go to. No problem. They can go to cleaningupyourmentalmess.com, and that'll take you to all the links where books are sold. You can go to drleaf.com, same thing, and you can get to access to Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. You can follow me on Instagram, Dr. Caroline Leaf, where I put out, like everyone else, statements every day and post to help you. But that'll also take you to how you can order the book. We have a free seminar coming up on the 28th of February, which is a neurocycle seminar, which people can also learn more about the book. If they pre-order, there's a 3-week book club, which follows from the seminar. There's bonus chapters. There's a chapter for kids in neurocycling. There's 1 month free of the Neurocycle app. There's all kinds of pre-order benefits that people can get their hands on if they pre-order and register the pre-order. So there's how they can get their hands on it. Beautiful,
beautiful. I always applaud you for doing all this amazing work on the back end to do the research and do the deep learning that it takes to deliver tools that reliably help people. Can't wait to read this book myself. And again, I'm always so inspired by everything that you bring to it. Thank you so much for gracing us with these tools. I know people listening to this right now have been inspired and have hope to create some change in their own life. And so I want everybody, I tell you guys to do this every time, take a screenshot right now as you're listening, tag Dr. Leaf, tag me, tag Ignited. Let us know some specific lessons, some specific tips that she provided or stories that you heard or something like that really resonates with you. What I find over and over is people share that.
So nice.
Others get connected and go, oh my goodness, I didn't listen to that part, and can go back and really get the most out of this. So thank you so much.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. And it's always wonderful talking to you. And thank you for the fantastic work you do. And I look forward to us doing something more in the future together. It'll be wonderful.
Absolutely. I can't wait for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.